you walk through the marble corridors of the Great Palace in Constantinople, the year 537 CE. The morning light filters through ornate windows, casting long shadows across polished floors where the footsteps of history echo. Here, in these very halls, lived individuals whose stories challenge our understanding of power, identity, and human resilience in the ancient world. Today, we embark on a journey to understand one of history's most complex and often misunderstood institutions, the role of eunuchs in ancient empires. This isn't a tale of sensationalism or voyeuristic curiosity, but rather a scholarly exploration of human experiences within constraining systems. A study of how individuals navigated, influenced, and sometimes transcended the circumstances that defined their lives. The institution of court eunuchs existed across multiple civilizations and centuries, from the Byzantine Empire to Tang Dynasty China, from the Ottoman court to various Islamic kingdoms. These weren't isolated practices, but systematic approaches to imperial administration that created unique social positions occupied by thousands of individuals throughout history. When we encounter this topic in popular discourse, we're often presented with oversimplified narratives that reduce complex human experiences to mere curiosities. But the reality is far more nuanced. The individuals who occupied these positions were administrators, generals, scholars, artists, and advisors. They were mentors and students, friends and rivals. They were human beings who lived full, complex lives within systems that simultaneously constrained and empowered them. Understanding these historical experiences requires us to move beyond modern assumptions and examine the social, political, and economic contexts that created these roles. We must consider how different societies understood gender, power, and social mobility. We need to recognize that our contemporary perspectives, while valuable for critical analysis, shouldn't overshadow the lived experiences of historical individuals. The sources we rely on present their own challenges. Many historical accounts were written by court chroniclers or later historians who may not have fully understood or accurately represented these experiences. Some records focus on exceptional individuals who achieved great prominence, while the lives of others remain largely undocumented. Archaeological evidence, administrative records, and comparative analysis across cultures help us build a more complete picture. Our exploration will take us across continents and centuries, examining how different empires developed these institutions and how individuals within them created meaningful lives. We'll discover stories of remarkable achievement, complex relationships, and lasting cultural contributions. We'll also acknowledge the profound personal costs and systemic inequalities that defined these experiences. This journey requires empathy and scholarly rigor in equal measure. We approach these stories not as distant curiosities, but as windows into human experiences that reveal broader truths about power, identity, and resilience. These individuals weren't victims without agency, nor were they simply beneficiaries of unique opportunities. They were complex people who navigated challenging circumstances, sometimes achieving extraordinary influence while always operating within significant constraints. As we begin this exploration, we honor the memory and experiences of those whose lives we examine. Their stories deserve to be told with respect, nuance, and historical accuracy. Not as objects of fascination, but as integral parts of the human story that continues to inform our understanding of history, identity, and the enduring capacity for human adaptation and achievement. To understand individual experiences, we must first examine the broader systems that created and sustained these positions across different civilizations. The development of eunuch roles in imperial courts wasn't arbitrary. It emerged from specific political, social, and economic needs that varied across cultures while sharing certain common characteristics. In the Byzantine Empire, the position evolved from earlier Roman administrative practices, but took on distinctly different characteristics under Christian imperial rule. The Byzantine court required administrators who could move freely between public and private imperial spaces without threatening dynastic succession or creating competing power bases through marriage alliances. Eunuchs could serve as intimate advisors to emperors and empresses, manage vast administrative apparatus, and accumulate significant wealth and influence without establishing rival dynasties. The logic was both practical and political. Imperial courts required trusted individuals who could handle sensitive diplomatic correspondence, manage treasury affairs, and oversee complex ceremonial protocols. Traditional aristocratic families with their own political ambitions and marriage networks presented potential challenges to imperial authority. Eunuchs, by contrast, could develop deep loyalty to specific rulers while remaining outside traditional power structures. In Tang Dynasty China, similar considerations led to different institutional arrangements. The Chinese imperial system required administrators who could serve in the inner palace without threatening the emperor's exclusive access to imperial consorts. But beyond these practical considerations, Chinese court culture also valued scholarly achievement, artistic refinement, and administrative expertise qualities that some eunuch officials cultivated to remarkable degrees. The examination system that governed Chinese bureaucracy was theoretically open to eunuchs, though social realities often limited their access to traditional scholarly preparation. However, those who gained positions through palace connections sometimes pursued learning with extraordinary dedication, becoming accomplished poets, historians, and scholars. Their unique position between the inner palace and outer court provided perspectives that proved valuable in governance and diplomacy. Islamic empires developed their own variations of these institutions, often influenced by Persian administrative traditions and Byzantine practices. In the Ottoman Empire, the Devshirme system created a pipeline of administrators and military officers from conquered Christian populations, some of whom served as eunuch officials in various capacities. These individuals often received extensive education and could rise to positions of considerable authority within the imperial hierarchy. The economic dimensions of these systems were equally significant. In many cases, the initial transition to eunuch status occurred during childhood, sometimes through sale by impoverished families, sometimes through capture during military campaigns. This harsh reality underscores the profound inequalities that characterize these historical periods. However, for those who survived and gained positions within imperial courts, economic opportunities could be substantial. Successful eunuch officials often accumulated significant wealth through their administrative roles, becoming patrons of arts and scholarship, funding architectural projects, and supporting extended networks of dependents and protégés. Some established charitable foundations, commissioned religious buildings, and contributed to cultural developments that outlasted their individual lives. The social dynamics surrounding these positions were complex and varied across cultures. In some contexts, eunuch officials formed their own social networks, creating communities of mutual support and shared experience. They often served as mentors to younger individuals entering similar positions, passing on not only practical knowledge about court protocols and administrative procedures, but also strategies for navigating the psychological and social challenges of their unique circumstances. Religious and cultural factors also shaped these institutions differently across various societies. In Christian Byzantine culture, celibacy carried different connotations than in Islamic or Chinese contexts. Some eunuch officials in Christian empires embraced religious vocations, becoming influential figures in ecclesiastical hierarchies and theological disputes. Their unique social position sometimes allowed them to bridge different religious communities and serve as intermediaries in complex theological negotiations. The decline of these institutions occurred gradually and for different reasons across various empires. Changes in military technology, shifts in administrative practices, evolving social attitudes, and the rise of different political systems all contributed to their eventual disappearance. But for centuries, they represented significant pathways to influence and achievement for individuals who might otherwise have remained marginal to historical events. Understanding these systemic contexts helps us appreciate both the constraints and opportunities that defined individual experiences within these institutions. The next phase of our exploration will examine how specific historical figures navigated these complex systems, creating meaningful lives and leaving lasting contributions to their societies. Behind the institutional structures and historical generalizations lie individual human stories of remarkable complexity and achievement. These are narratives of people who transformed constraints into opportunities, who found ways to exercise agency within restrictive systems, and who left indelible marks on the civilizations they served. Consider Narses, whose story illuminates the possibilities and contradictions of Byzantine imperial service. Born in Armenia around 478 CE, he entered imperial service during the reign of Justinian I and rose to become one of the empire's most successful military commanders. You might imagine him in the year 552, standing on the battlefield of Tagine in Italy, directing the movements of Byzantine forces against Ostrogothic armies. At 74 years old, this Armenian eunuch was commanding one of the most significant military campaigns in Mediterranean history. Narses wasn't simply following orders, he was making strategic decisions that would reshape the political landscape of Italy and secure Byzantine control over territories that had been lost for generations. His military genius was recognized by contemporaries and celebrated by historians. He understood logistics, diplomacy, and battlefield tactics with equal skill. His campaigns required him to coordinate with diverse populations, manage complex supply chains, and navigate the treacherous politics of 6th century Italy. But Narses was more than a military commander. He was a patron of arts and architecture, funding projects that beautified Constantinople and other Byzantine cities. He maintained correspondence with scholars and theologians, participating in the intellectual life of his era. He formed deep friendships and professional relationships that sustained him through decades of imperial service. His personal quarters in the Great Palace were reportedly filled with books, artworks, and gifts from diplomatic missions across the known world. The Chinese Admiral Zheng He presents another extraordinary example of individual achievement within constraining circumstances. Born Ma He around 1371, he was captured as a child during military campaigns in Yunnan province and eventually entered service in the imperial court. By the early 15th century, he had become one of the most trusted advisors to the Yongle Emperor and was chosen to lead unprecedented maritime expeditions that would reach Southeast Asia, India, the Persian Gulf, and the eastern coast of Africa. Picture Zheng He standing on the deck of his massive treasure ship, perhaps 300 feet in length, as his fleet of hundreds of vessels prepared to depart from Nanjing. These weren't mere exploration missions. They were complex diplomatic, commercial, and cultural exchanges that demonstrated Chinese power and sophistication to rulers across the Indian Ocean world. Zheng He had to master not only navigation and maritime logistics, but also multiple languages, diplomatic protocols, and the intricate requirements of international trade. His expeditions brought back exotic animals, precious stones, new technologies, and detailed geographic knowledge that expanded Chinese understanding of the world. But they also required him to negotiate with dozens of different rulers, understand varying cultural customs, and maintain discipline among crews numbering in the thousands. His leadership skills, cultural sensitivity, and organizational abilities made these remarkable voyages possible. Zheng He also participated in Chinese scholarly and religious culture. He was a devout Muslim who built mosques and supported Islamic communities within Chinese territory, while simultaneously serving Buddhist and Confucian imperial traditions. His tomb inscription describes him as someone who read widely in books and history and who understood the ways of warfare. He embodied the cosmopolitan sophistication that characterized the Ming court at its height. In the Ottoman Empire, individuals like Ibrahim Pasha demonstrated similar abilities to transform challenging circumstances into opportunities for extraordinary achievement. Born into a Christian family in the Balkans, he was recruited through the Devshirme system and educated in the palace schools of Constantinople. By the 1520s, he had become Grand Vizier under Suleiman the Magnificent, effectively serving as the second most powerful person in one of the world's largest empires. Ibrahim Pasha managed military campaigns that extended Ottoman control deep into Europe and across North Africa. He oversaw administrative reforms that improved taxation, legal procedures, and provincial governance. He patronized poets, artists, and architects who created some of the Ottoman Empire's most celebrated cultural achievements. His palace in Constantinople became a center of learning and cultural refinement that attracted visitors from across Europe and the Islamic world. These individuals shared certain characteristics that enabled their remarkable achievements. They were intellectually curious, investing significant time and energy in learning languages, studying history, and understanding the cultures they encountered. They developed networks of relationships that transcended traditional social boundaries, forming alliances with scholars, merchants, diplomats, and other officials who could support their endeavors. They also demonstrated remarkable psychological resilience, living between different worlds, neither fully part of traditional family structures nor entirely outside them, required them to develop sophisticated emotional and social skills. They learned to read complex political situations, manage competing interests, and maintain their positions through changing imperial circumstances. Many became mentors to younger individuals entering similar situations, creating informal support networks that provided guidance, protection, and opportunities for advancement. They understood that their achievements weren't solely individual accomplishments, but results of collaborative relationships with teachers, colleagues, and dependents who shared their successes and challenges. Their religious and philosophical lives were often complex and deeply personal. Some embraced mystical traditions that provided spiritual frameworks for understanding their unique circumstances. Others became scholars of theology or philosophy, contributing to intellectual debates that shaped their society's understanding of identity, purpose, and human dignity. These individual stories remind us that historical generalizations, while necessary for understanding broad patterns, can obscure the rich complexity of actual human experiences. Each person navigated their circumstances differently, creating unique combinations of achievement, relationship, and meaning that reflected their individual personalities, talents, and choices within the constraints they faced. The contributions of eunuch officials extended far beyond their individual achievements, shaping the cultural, intellectual, and political development of the civilizations they served. Their unique positions between different social worlds often enabled them to serve as bridges, innovators, and preservers of knowledge in ways that left lasting historical impacts. In the realm of military strategy and statecraft, figures like Narses revolutionized Byzantine approaches to warfare and territorial administration. His successful campaigns in Italy weren't simply tactical victories. They represented sophisticated integration of diplomatic negotiation, logistical planning, and cultural sensitivity that became models for later imperial expeditions. The administrative systems he established in reconquered territories balanced local autonomy with imperial control in ways that maintained stability for generations. His approach to governing diverse populations, Romans, Goths, Lombards, and others, required him to understand multiple legal traditions, religious practices, and cultural expectations. The compromises he negotiated and the administrative structures he created demonstrated possibilities for inclusive imperial governance that influenced Byzantine policy for centuries. Later emperors and their advisors studied his methods, adapting his strategies to different circumstances and territories. The cultural contributions of eunuch officials were equally significant. In Tang Dynasty China, several eunuch scholars and artists made lasting contributions to poetry, painting, and historical writing. Their unique perspectives, informed by intimate knowledge of court life, but also by experiences of marginalization and social complexity, enriched Chinese literary and artistic traditions in distinctive ways. Some became celebrated poets whose works were included in imperial anthologies and studied by later generations of scholars. Their poetry often explored themes of loyalty, friendship, and the search for meaning within constraining circumstances, themes that resonated broadly in Chinese literary culture. Their artistic patronage supported painters, calligraphers, and craftsmen who created works that are still celebrated today. In the Ottoman Empire, eunuch officials played crucial roles in architectural and urban development projects that transformed the physical landscape of Constantinople and other major cities. They commissioned mosques, schools, hospitals, and public baths that served both religious and practical needs of urban populations. These building projects employed thousands of craftsmen and artists, stimulating economic development while creating architectural landmarks that defined Ottoman urban culture. The educational institutions they supported often became centers of learning that attracted scholars from across the Islamic world. Libraries they established preserved manuscripts and supported scholarship that advanced understanding in fields ranging from astronomy and mathematics to poetry and theology. Some of these institutions continued operating for centuries, educating generations of students and preserving knowledge through periods of political instability. The diplomatic contributions of eunuch officials were particularly significant in facilitating cultural exchange between different civilizations. Zheng He's expeditions, for example, weren't simply demonstrations of Chinese power. They were complex cultural encounters that brought new knowledge, technologies, and artistic traditions to China while introducing Chinese innovations to societies across the Indian Ocean world. The detailed records kept during these expeditions provided Chinese scholars with unprecedented geographic and ethnographic information about distant societies. The plants, animals, and manufactured goods they brought back enriched Chinese agriculture, medicine, and craftsmanship. The diplomatic relationships they established created networks of communication and trade that continued long after the expeditions ended. Similarly, Byzantine eunuch diplomats often served as cultural intermediaries between Christian and Islamic civilizations, facilitating exchanges of knowledge and artistic traditions despite ongoing military conflicts. Their ability to move between different cultural contexts, combined with their education in multiple languages and religious traditions, made them valuable ambassadors who could navigate complex negotiations and build understanding across cultural divides. The decline of these institutions occurred gradually and for different reasons across various empires, but their cultural legacies persisted in multiple forms. Administrative practices they developed continued to influence imperial governance long after the positions themselves disappeared. Architectural projects they commissioned remained prominent features of urban landscapes, serving as reminders of their contributions to civic life. Educational institutions they supported evolved into different organizational forms, but continued to preserve and transmit knowledge they had helped accumulate. Literary and artistic works they created or patronized became part of classical traditions that shaped cultural development for generations. The diplomatic relationships and trade networks they established provided foundations for later international connections. Modern historians have increasingly recognized the significance of these contributions, moving beyond earlier approaches that marginalized or overlooked the achievements of eunuch officials. Contemporary scholarship examines their roles in technological innovation, cultural synthesis, and administrative development with greater appreciation for their historical importance. Archaeological research has uncovered evidence of their material contributions: palace complexes they designed, religious buildings they commissioned, and artistic objects they collected. Documentary analysis has revealed the extent of their intellectual achievements and their influence on policy decisions that shaped imperial development. This evolving understanding reflects broader changes in historical methodology that emphasize the importance of examining diverse perspectives and recognizing the contributions of individuals who might have been marginalized by traditional political structures, but who nonetheless played significant roles in historical development. Their legacies remind us that cultural achievement and historical significance aren't limited to those who occupied conventional positions of authority. Innovation, creativity, and lasting contribution can emerge from individuals who navigate complex circumstances with intelligence, determination, and vision, regardless of the constraints they face or the unconventional paths their lives may take. As we conclude our exploration of these remarkable historical experiences, we find ourselves confronting fundamental questions about human nature, social organization, and the complex relationships between constraint and opportunity that have shaped societies throughout history. The lives we've examined offer profound insights that extend far beyond their specific historical contexts. The individuals whose stories we've explored, Narses, Jinghe, Ibrahim Pasha, and countless others whose names may be lost to history, demonstrate the extraordinary capacity of human beings to create meaning, achieve excellence, and contribute to their societies even within systems that imposed significant limitations on their lives. Their experiences challenge us to think more deeply about concepts of agency, identity, and achievement. These historical narratives reveal how individuals can exercise meaningful choice and influence even within constraining circumstances. Rather than being passive victims of their situations, these individuals actively shaped their own destinies and the development of their civilizations. They made strategic decisions about education, relationships, and career paths that maximized their opportunities for achievement and contribution. Their stories also illuminate the complex relationship between personal fulfillment and social contribution. Many found deep satisfaction in their roles as administrators, military leaders, scholars, and cultural patrons. They formed meaningful relationships, pursued intellectual interests, and created lasting legacies that reflected their individual talents and values. Their lives remind us that human flourishing can take many different forms and occur under widely varying circumstances. The institutional systems they navigated were products of their historical moments, reflecting the political needs, social structures, and cultural values of their respective civilizations. While we may view some aspects of these systems as problematic from contemporary perspectives, understanding them within their historical contexts helps us appreciate both the constraints and opportunities they created for the individuals who lived within them. Modern historical scholarship approaches these topics with increasing sophistication, employing methodological approaches that seek to understand historical experiences on their own terms, while also examining them through contemporary analytical frameworks. This dual perspective allows us to appreciate both the specific achievements of historical individuals and the broader patterns of human adaptation and resilience they represent. Contemporary historians emphasize the importance of examining multiple sources, comparing experiences across different cultures and time periods, and remaining attentive to the ways that power relationships shaped the creation and preservation of historical records. They recognize that understanding marginalized or unusual historical experiences requires careful attention to the biases and limitations of available sources. Archaeological evidence, administrative records, literary texts, and artistic objects all contribute to our understanding of these historical experiences. But each type of source presents its own interpretive challenges. Building comprehensive understanding requires integrating information from multiple sources while remaining aware of the gaps and uncertainties that characterize all historical knowledge. The study of these historical experiences also contributes to broader conversations about identity, gender, power, and social organization that remain relevant to contemporary society. While the specific institutional arrangements we've examined no longer exist, the fundamental questions they raise about human adaptation, social mobility, and the relationship between individual achievement and systemic constraint continue to resonate. These historical narratives offer valuable perspectives on resilience, creativity, and the capacity for human flourishing under challenging circumstances. They demonstrate how individuals can find ways to contribute meaningfully to their societies while also pursuing personal fulfillment and intellectual growth. They show us examples of people who refused to be defined solely by their limitations, and instead focused on developing their talents and making positive contributions to their communities. As we reflect on these stories, we're reminded of the importance of approaching historical study with both scholarly rigor and human empathy. These weren't abstract historical phenomena, but lived experiences of real people who faced real challenges and achieved real accomplishments. Their stories deserve to be told with accuracy, nuance, and respect for their complexity and humanity. The individuals whose lives we've explored left us with lasting reminders that human potential can flourish under the most unlikely circumstances, that creativity and achievement aren't limited to those who enjoy conventional advantages, and that meaningful contribution to human civilization can take many different forms. Their legacies continue to enrich our understanding of history and inspire our appreciation for the remarkable diversity and resilience of human experience. In studying their lives, we honor not only their individual achievements, but also their embodiment of fundamental human capacities for adaptation, growth, and contribution that continue to shape our world today. Their stories remind us that history is ultimately about people complex, creative, resilient people who found ways to make their lives meaningful and their contributions lasting, regardless of the circumstances they faced. Their experiences teach us that human dignity and achievement aren't dependent on conventional paths to success, that meaningful lives can be created within constraining systems, and that individual agency and social contribution remain possible even under challenging circumstances. These lessons remain as relevant today as they were centuries ago, offering timeless insights into the enduring capacity of human beings to transcend limitations and create lasting value for themselves and their communities.